Okay, we are going to look at standard form. So what is standard form? Standard form is ax plus by equals c. Now, there are a couple of things that we want to make sure we know here with standard form. Some specific things we need to understand. One, a must be positive. All that means is your x term has to have a positive value. And we'll do some examples here where it's not, and we may need to change it. The other thing with standard form, you can have no fractions. Oops, sorry. It's not very good. Fractions or decimals. Now, later on, as we do problems, we're going to find that with standard form, typically we use this with word problems, and sometimes in the word problem itself it may have decimals and that sort of thing, but if you're technically putting it in standard form, you can't have fractions or decimals. Okay, so let's talk about some positives and negatives about the different forms. So this is a good little exercise here at the beginning. You can read slope from the equation. Can we see slope from standard form? No, we can't. Can we see it from slope-intercept form? Well, yes, we can. Can we see it from point-slope form? Yes, okay. You can read the y-intercept from the equation. Standard form. No. Slope-intercept. There you go, intercept, yes. Point-slope. No. Okay, because it's a point. Now, sometimes that point may be the y-intercept, but typically it's not. So we look at standard form, and neither one of these things are true. And we're like, well, why even do standard form? Again, 95% of the time, standard form is utilized when we're talking about word problems. So you're going to see a lot of times that that's where we use it. Now, on your state test, there's a good possibility they may ask you to put something in standard form, and later on, when we start doing what are known as systems, standard form becomes useful in a lot of ways. Okay, so let's just go ahead and let's look at some problems. So again, I always encourage you look at the examples they give you and see how they kind of work them out. But we're going to do these your term problems here. So it wants us to write these in standard form with the given information. So I'm going to create some space here by writing over all this to be able to work these out. So just to make it a little bit easier in terms of doing these example problems. So what you may have to do, you may either have to write small, or you may have to put this work over on the side of your book a little bit. Okay, I think that should be enough, hopefully. So I'm going to do problem 4 here in black, and then I'll do problem 5 in blue to differentiate the two. Alright, so what do we have? We have slope, and then we have a point. So in this case, I'm going to start with point-slope form. Now I'm going to do number 5 slightly different. So this one I'm going to start with point-slope. So this is a good review of the previous module lesson. So this is my x1, this is my y1, and this is my m. So I'm just going to plug everything in. Now remember, because the equation here is minus, when we have a negative sign, it actually becomes a positive. It becomes the opposite. So this becomes a plus 10 equals negative 2 times parentheses x plus 7. Okay, so next thing we're going to do distributive property here. So we get y plus 10 equals negative 2x minus 14. I've got to get all my x's and y's on one side, and then my constants, or just my numbers, on the other. So I'm going to move this 2x over by adding. I got to do the opposite, so I add 2x over here. I'm going to get rid of the 10 by subtracting. And I'll put the 10 with the 14 because those are like terms. So these cancel, so now I'm left with a 2x, that is a positive y there, equals negative 24. So things to point out. My x term, my a is positive, and I have no fractions or decimals. So that is in standard form. All right, let's do this next one a little differently. Let's start this one in slope-intercept form, y equals mx plus b. So here's my m, there's my x, and there's my y. So I'm going to plug those in. And what I'm going to do is I'm going to solve for my b here. So I get 0 is negative 12 plus b. So I add 12 to both sides. So that gives me 12 is b. Now I'm going to go back to the slope-intercept form, y equals mx, and my b is 12 now. Now I'm going to just move my x over to the other side. Now to move it over to the other side, I do the opposite, which would be subtract. So these are going to cancel. So I'm left with negative 4x plus y equals 12. Alright, now it looks good initially because I have my x and y on the same side. I'm going to erase this, make just a little bit more space. But my x term here is not positive. So what I do? All I do is I go through, if I change the sign on this, I got to change the sign of everything. So that becomes negative, that becomes negative, and I'm now left with 4x minus y equals negative 12, and now that's standard form. So what do we say about math? Same thing in different ways. So just different ways of working these problems out. Alright, let's continue on here. Let's go to these next year term problems. We'll make this a little bigger and then I'll slide it over here in a second. Write an equation in standard form for each line. So again, this is the same thing. The only difference is now I actually have to find the slope. Now how you find the slope is completely up to you again. I do change in y. So change in y here is what? I went up 4. Change in x, here I went down 2. So change in y over change in x is 4 over negative 2. We always simplify, so that would be a negative 2, and that's my m. And now we're basically back to what we just got through doing. Now I have my m, and you pick a form to use. I'm going to go back and do the slope-intercept form. So I'm going to do y equals mx plus b. I'm going to use this as my x and my y. So my y here is negative 3 equals m times my x, which is 2, plus b. So negative 3 equals negative 4 plus b. I add 4 to both sides. That tells me b is 1. Now I'm going to take both of these, put them in slope-intercept form. So y equals mx plus b. I'm going to move my x term over. To do that, I add. Let's cancel. So now I have 2x plus y equals 1, and that's in standard form because my x is positive and I have no fractions or decimals. Okay, let's do this one. So you're getting some good practice here. Again, how do you want to do slope? Well, this time I'll use the formula. Even though I hate it, I'm going to use it here just to demonstrate, okay, that there are different ways to do it. So I'm going to label this x1, y1, label this x2, y2. I'm going to plug those in the formula. So negative 6 minus 5 over negative 10 minus 1. That gives me negative 11 over negative 11, which is a positive 1. So there's my m. This time I'm going to use point slope form. In this case, I'm going to use these because I don't like negatives if I can avoid them. So point slope form, y minus y1 equals m times x minus x1. So I have y minus 5 equals 1 times x minus 1. So then that's y minus 5 equals 1 times all that's just x minus 1. So I'm going to bring that up here. Now I've got to get my x and y's on the same side. So here that means I subtract x since that's a positive. I'm going to add 5. So those will cancel, those will cancel. That's going to leave me a negative x and a positive y equals 4. But then I've got to go through again and change my signs because x has to be positive. So then that leaves me x minus y equals negative 4. Alright, almost done. So let's look at a word problem. And let's do problem number 11. It says, write an equation in standard form to model. Actually, let's do both. Let's go ahead and do number 10, and then we'll do number 11. So this is what we were kind of talking about. Even though sometimes it may not start in standard form. A tank is being filled with gasoline at a rate 4.5 gallons per minute. So that's my M. And the gas tank contained 1.5 gallons of gasoline before filling started. So it's our starting point, or that's our B. So in this case, we're going to use slope-intercept form. Y equals M X plus B. Now, things to note here. Filled means it's going up, therefore our slope is positive, okay? And we started with 1.5 gallons in the tank. So both of those are positive values here. I'm going to move my X over. So I'm not going to show you. At this point we should know. But when I move it over, I do the opposite. So it becomes a negative 4.5x plus y equals 1.5. Got to go through and change all my signs because that X term has got to be positive. So now I have 4.5x minus y equals negative 1.5. Now, again, I'm not supposed to have decimals, okay? But in most word problems when we work, this is kind of what will happen. A lot of times you're going to have decimals in here. So how do I get rid of this? Well, I know 0.5 is a half, which means the denominator is 2. So I'm going to multiply everything in this problem by 2. And when I do that, that's going to give me 9x minus 2y equals negative 3. Now I have no fractions. Alright, one more problem, number 11. A pool that is being drained contains 18,000 gallons of water. Okay, 18,000 gallons of water. After 2 hours, 12,500 gallons of water remain. Okay, so there's something we got to figure out here. We started, so our starting value was at 0, we had 18,000 gallons. After 2 hours, we had 12,500 gallons. So it's like having 2 points here, where this is our y-intercept. That's our B because it's our 0 term. But I also have to get slope. So I'm going to do slope here is change in y. Okay, so what did my y's do? My y's went down 5,500. Change in x, what did my x do? My x went up 2. So that's going to give me negative 2,750. I believe that's correct. Okay, now y is our slope negative. So let's go back. This word drained means we're losing water. Therefore, our slope is negative because we're losing water out of it. Now, all we're going to do is exactly what we did in a previous problem. I'm going to slide over here just a little bit on the side. So we're going to start y equals m x plus our b was 18,000. So I'm going to move this over. When I move it over, it becomes a positive. My y here was positive, and then 18,000. And that one's already in standard form because my x is positive and I have no fractions or decimals. So as you go on, look at the homework. This is what most of the homework is. It's all about changing equations to standard form. So it's giving you some good practice of review here.